Unexpected attack. The day began like any other on the bustling streets of New York City. Commuters hurried to work, taxis honked in the morning traffic, and the sun glinted off the towering skyscrapers. No one had any inkling that high above, just beyond the blue sky, everything was about to change. Commander Zaravox of the Imperium stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Subjugator, gazing impassively at the blue-green planet filling the viewscreen. The primitive species below, the humans, remained blissfully unaware of the fleet of angular black ships hanging in orbit, poised to strike. "Commence the assault," Zara said calmly, her voice as cold as the void of space. In an instant, 1,000 plasma beams lanced down from the Imperium fleet, stabbing through the atmosphere to slam into targets across the planet's surface. Military bases, communication centers, power plants. Humanity's defenses crumbled under the onslaught. Fireballs blossomed on the continents below. Panic erupted across the Earth as the first reports of the attack spread like wildfire. Shaky camera footage of alien ships flashed across news feeds and social media platforms. World leaders were whisked away to secure bunkers. The militaries of various nations scrambled to respond, fighter jets launching to engage the alien threat. But the human warplanes were hopelessly outclassed. The Imperium's advanced fighter craft danced nimbly around the lumbering human jets, silvery hulls impervious to missiles and cannon fire. One by one, the human fighters winked out of existence, reduced to blossoms of flame and debris by hissing plasma beams. At the United Nations, pandemonium reigned. Ambassadors surged toward the exits as the distinct whine of a spacecraft filled the air. Screams erupted as the walls of the General Assembly chamber dissolved in green fire, alien figures storming into the room. The Secretary General stood firm at the podium, hands raised. "Please, we are a peaceful people. What do you want?" His words ended in a choked-off scream as a plasma bolt took him in the chest. His body crumpled to the floor, wisps of smoke rising from his charred suit. Commander Zaravox strode over the rubble, flanked by hulking armored Imperium soldiers. She stared down impassively at the human bodies strewn about the chamber. These primitives posed no real threat, she thought. Their feeble defenses had crumbled in mere hours. Soon this world and its resources would belong to the Imperium. But on the streets below, the humans were already mobilizing. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by grim determination. In Times Square, a group of National Guard troops frantically worked to erect a barricade, dragging cars and rubble into place. "Incoming," someone yelled, pointing skyward. An angular black craft was descending on a plume of green fire, plasma cannons swiveling to track the humans. The soldiers scattered, diving for cover, but the plasma bolts scythed through the barricade like it was made of paper. Broken bodies littered the street. Across the city, similar scenes played out as the alien landing party spread like a cancer. The police were overwhelmed, outgunned by the Imperium troops and their advanced weaponry. Fires raged unchecked, choking the streets with acrid black smoke. In Central Park, a platoon of human infantry made its last stand, crouched behind a low stone wall of Bethesda Terrace. They fired furiously at the advancing aliens, bullets pinging off the Imperium's energy shields. "Fall back," Lieutenant Davis called, ducking as a plasma bolt sizzled overhead. "We can't stop them." The soldiers retreated, helping their wounded, faces grim. The Imperium soldiers surged forward impassively, heedless of the humans they crushed underfoot. The earth below was burning, and no one seemed capable of halting the destruction. At the White House, President Amanda Tanner watched the chaos unfold via a bank of monitors, her face etched with worry lines. The Situation Room was in chaos, aides and generals arguing heatedly. What about a nuclear response? Someone proposed frantically. They'd shoot down the ICMBs before they even left the silos, a general countered. We have to think of something else. Tanner gazed at the carnage filling the screens. Alien ships, graceful and deadly. Imperium soldiers, encased head to toe in sleek black armor. It was like something out of a science fiction movie, except the blood and destruction was all too real. How could the ordinary men and women of the armed forces, with their rifles and Kevlar vests, hope to stand against such devastating technological might? Despair began to settle over the president like a shroud. Then her eyes fell on an old black and white photograph, framed on the wall. It showed a group of ragged soldiers huddled in the snow around a tattered American flag. The 101st Airborne Division in the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944. Outnumbered, outgunned, besieged by the Nazi war machine, yet they had held the line. A flicker of hope kindled in Tanner's chest. If the greatest generation could prevail against impossible odds, then perhaps humanity had a chance against this alien threat. Not through technological superiority, but through courage, determination, and indomitable human spirit. Enough, the president said, an icy calm settling over her. The generals fell silent. This is still our world, and we're not giving it up without a fight. But we'll have to fight smarter, not harder. She turned to the Secretary of Defense. Mobilize everything we've got. And I do mean everything. We're going to show these alien bastards what happens when you back humanity into a corner. As the orders went out, a grim excitement began to build in the Situation Room, a sense that maybe, just maybe, all was not lost. On the screens, the alien ships still swarmed triumphant, but the humans of Earth were about to remind the Imperium that even a cornered ant can sometimes take down a lion. Desperate measures. In the days following the initial Imperium assault, the situation on Earth grew increasingly dire. The alien invaders continued their relentless advance, crushing any resistance with overwhelming technological might. Human armies fell back in disarray, leaving burning cities and broken bodies in their wake. At an emergency summit, military leaders from around the globe gathered to strategize, their faces haggard and grim. With most major cities under alien control and casualties in the millions, the prospect of mounting an effective defense seemed bleak. General Xu Lin of the People's Liberation Army slammed a fist on the table in frustration. Our anti-air defenses barely scratch them. Missiles, cannons, nothing seems to penetrate those damned energy shields. The Russians just threw a tactical nuke at a landing zone outside Moscow. General Richter of Germany added somberly. The Imperium ships shot it down like swatting a fly. Then we've got to change tactics, Admiral Singh of India declared. We can't beat them head-on, but perhaps there's another way. All eyes turned to Dr. Ellen Briggs, a lead researcher from Dara, PA. She had a gleam of excitement in her weariness-lined eyes. I may have something, she said. We've been analyzing the Imperium's shield technology, and we think it operates on a high-frequency electromagnetic resonance. In theory, a powerful enough EMP could disrupt it, at least temporarily. But our EMP weapons barely phase them, a French colonel pointed out. True, our modern microelectronics-based EMPs are too refined, Dr. Briggs agreed. But I'm not talking about modern weapons. She paused, almost hesitantly. I'm talking about something a bit more retrograde. The officers exchanged puzzled frowns. President Tanner leaned forward intently. Go on, Doctor. Dr. Briggs took a breath. Back in the 1950s, during the early days of the Cold War, the US and Soviets both experimented with EMP weapons, crude things, all vacuum tubes and copper coils. But powerful. Some of the designs could theoretically black out half a continent. You're saying we should use antique tech against the aliens' advanced weaponry? General Xu asked incredulously. Their shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and AI-guided missiles, Briggs explained patiently. They'd see our modern EMP weapons coming from a mile away. But a powerful analog pulse, it just might slip under their radar. Tanner nodded slowly, a glimmer of hope sparking in her eyes. Do we have any of these old weapons still around? A few, Admiral Singh confirmed. Mothballed in storage mostly. We'd have to work fast to get them combat ready. See that it's done, the president ordered. In the meantime, we'll need a delivery system. She turned to General Richter. "What about those old diesel-electric subs your Navy still keeps around for training? Think they could get in close to the Imperium ships?" A slow grin spread over Richter's face as he cottoned on to the plan. I think they just might. No advanced electronics for the alien sensors to detect, and they're damn quiet when running on batteries." "It's a desperate plan," General Xu said doubtfully. "Many would call it suicidal." "Desperate times call for desperate measures," Tanner replied grimly. "We're out of options. It's time to show the Imperium the meaning of human resolve." As the meeting broke up and the officers hurried off to set the audacious plan in motion, Dr. Briggs approached the president, her face lined with worry. "This is all highly theoretical," she cautioned. "The analog EMPs might not have the desired effect. And even if they do, the aliens will adapt quickly. We'll likely only get one shot at this." Tanner laid a hand on the doctor's shoulder. "One shot is all we need. We'll make it count." As news of the plan spread through the ranks, a renewed sense of determination took hold. Mechanics worked around the clock to bring old hardware back to fighting trim. Grizzled submarine crews volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. And around the world, ragtag bands of human partisans sharpened knives and cleaned rifles, preparing to take the fight to the alien invaders. The Imperium, secure in their technological supremacy, remained oblivious to the coming storm. On the bridge of the subjugator, Commander Zoravox gazed at the burning planet below with satisfaction. The primitives' resistance had crumbled like rotted wood. Soon, this world would be another jewel in the Imperium's crown, its populace enslaved, its resources stripped bare. But the humans of Earth, bloodied but unbroken, had a surprise in store for the overconfident invaders. The battle was far from over, and the Imperium was about to learn the true depths of human tenacity and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Turning the tide. In a remote fjord along the misty coast of Norway, a small flotilla of antiquated diesel-electric submarines slipped silently through the dark water. On the deck of the Lid sub, the HFY, a group of grim-faced sailors worked to secure a massive cylindrical device, all gleaming copper and humming vacuum tubes. "Easy does it," Chief Iverson cautioned as the EMP generator was gingerly lowered into the sub's forward torpedo tube. "This thing's older than my granddad. Treat her gentle-like." In the conning tower, Captain Halvorsen peered through binoculars at the alien craft hovering on the horizon, a looming black wedge bristling with weapons. The Imperium ship was a scouting vessel, sent to hunt down pockets of human resistance. It had no idea the Arctic Earth submarines lurked nearby, analog systems masked from the alien sensors. "Load torpedo tubes 1 and 2 with the EMP devices," Halvorsen ordered crisply. "Flood the tubes, all ahead 1/3, gentle on the rudder." With scarcely a gurgle, the Aver crept forward, the other subs falling into formation astern. On the bridge, Ensign Jacobsen studied the alien ship's emission profile on an old CRT monitor. "Their shields are still up, Skipper," he reported, generating 1 Helluva magnetic resonance. Halvorsen nodded grimly. The Imperium ship had to lower its shields to launch landing craft. They'd only have a tiny window to strike. He glanced at the photo of his wife and daughter taped above the instrument panel, allowing himself a moment of pained regret. He'd likely never see them again. But if this worked, they'd have a fighting chance at a future free of alien tyranny. 2,000 meters in closing, the sonar operator called. "Estimate 2 minutes to optimal firing position." Halvorsen took a steadying breath, hand hovering over the firing key. The reduced crew around him were tense but resolute, acutely aware of the long odds of their mission. They had all volunteered, knowing full well it was likely a one-way trip. 1,000 meters, the sonar operator reported. Alien shields still up. Halvorsen's grip tightened on the firing key, eyes never leaving the looming alien ship. Just a few seconds more. Suddenly, a familiar thrum filled the air as the Imperium vessel powered up its landing craft. On the monitor, Ensign Jacobson let out a jubilant shout. "Skipper, their shields are fluctuating. They're dropping." "Fire 1 and 2. Rapid," Halvorsen barked, slamming his palm down on the firing key. The Utfair shuddered as the jury-rigged EMP torpedoes burst from the tubes, racing toward the alien ship on plumes of compressed air. Halvorsen held his breath, mentally tracking their progress. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. A massive pulse of electromagnetic energy erupted against the Imperium ship's hull, a cascading wave of blue-white lightning that danced and flickered across the angular black metal. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden flare of sparks, the alien ship's shields collapsed, the energy barrier winking out like a snuffed candle. The wedge-shaped craft listed drunkenly, lights flickering, as secondary explosions burst along its hull. A ragged cheer went up in the Utfair's control room. Against all odds, the antique EMP torpedoes had worked, slipping beneath the Imperium ship's sophisticated defenses to fry its delicate systems. "Relay to Fleet Command," Halvorsen ordered, his voice shaking slightly with barely suppressed triumph. "Alpha target is down. Repeat, Alpha target shields are down. Initiate second phase." Even as the Utfair and her sister subs faded back into the deep fjord, engines already straining for safe harbor, the next stage of the daring plan was swinging into action. From hidden bases in a dozen nations, flights of mothballed F-111 and Avro Vulcan bombers lumbered into the air, hulls crowded with hastily refitted anti-ship missiles. With the Imperium ship's shields down, the elderly human aircraft stood a fighting chance of getting close enough to inflict real damage. And in near-Earth orbit, the International Space Station's remaining crew worked feverishly to reposition the venerable structure, jury-rigged railguns swiveling to track the wounded alien craft. Caught utterly off guard by the sudden, coordinated attack, the Imperium ship reeled under the onslaught. Missiles and shells tore through its unshielded hull, shredding vital systems and venting compartments to space. Fires raged uncontrolled through the once pristine corridors, the crew thrown into chaos. On the subjugator's bridge, Commander Zora Vox watched in mute incomprehension as her scout ship's distress beacon abruptly cut off in a squeal of static. The humans, the primitives, had somehow struck a devastating blow. It defied all logical understanding. In that moment, a cold sliver of doubt warmed into Zora's heart for the first time. The Imperium had gravely underestimated these humans. Their sheer grit and tenacious resolve was like nothing the commander had ever encountered. As the Imperium fleet moved to regroup, Zora knew the fight was far from over. If anything, the humans' shocking success would only stiffen their resistance. An unfamiliar sensation began to swirl in her gut, an emotion she scarcely recognized. Fear. On Earth's surface, word of the unlikely victory spread like wildfire. In hidden comm centers and makeshift bunkers, ragged bands of human fighters exchanged triumphant grins and clasped hands in weary congratulation. For the first time since the invasion began, a flicker of hope stirred in humanity's breast. The alien juggernaut was not invincible after all, and Earth's defenders, bloodied but unbroken, now steeled themselves for the long fight ahead. Prevailing through grit, in the wake of the successful strike against the Imperium scouting ship, a renewed sense of determination took hold among Earth's beleaguered defenders. The jubilation was tempered with grim realism. One battle did not win a war, and the alien forces remained vastly superior. But for the first time, the Imperium's aura of invincibility had been shattered. As battered human ships and aircraft limped back to hidden bases for hasty repairs, military leaders pored over after-action reports, desperate to glean any further chinks in the aliens' armor. In a hardened bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Ellen Briggs and her team worked feverishly to refine their jury-rigged EMP weapons. "The key is the pulse frequency," Briggs explained to an exhausted-looking President Tanner. "We need to match the resonance of their shields precisely. Even a slight deviation, and the effect is greatly diminished." Tanner nodded wearily. the weight of the war effort etched in the lines of her face. "Do what you have to do, Doctor. The survival of our species is at stake." As the research team labored on, striving to wring every last ounce of performance from the vintage tech, scattered bands of human forces staged hit-and-run raids against Imperium outposts and supply lines. In the ruins of shattered cities, resistance cells planted IEDs and sniped at alien patrols. Despite the Imperium's overwhelming firepower, the human guerrillas refused to be cowed. In low Earth orbit, the crew of the crippled ISS licked their wounds and prepared for the next round. With most of the station's modern systems fried by EMP feedback, they had to rely on sheer human ingenuity to keep the railguns operational. "Targeting's all manual, Cap," Specialist Liu reported, hunched over a makeshift periscope sight. "But we've got a little surprise rigged up. Those gray bastards come sniffing around again. We'll give 'em a faceful of thermite." Commander Ivanova allowed herself a tight smile. The crew's grim resolve was heartening. They'd make the Imperium pay for every inch of orbital space and blood. On the ground, the tide of battle ebbed to and fro. The Imperium forces, stunned by their shocking setback, threw themselves into the offensive with redoubled fury. Black ships rained devastation from the skies, while massed formations of armor-clad alien soldiers marched relentlessly forward. But the human defenders met them with equal determination, making the invaders pay for every street and hillside retaken. Antique tanks, some little more than local museum pieces hastily refitted, dueled with alien landers. Air forces cobbled together from any aircraft still flying harried the Imperium flanks. And all the while, the resistance waged a shadowy campaign of sabotage and assassination behind enemy lines. The fighting was savage, a war unlike any in human history. Imperium plasma beams crisscrossed with old-fashioned bullets, rail cannon rounds tore through alien hulls, and human steel alike. Soldiers on both sides died by the thousands. Yet through it all, the ragged human defenders refused to break. They gave ground stubbornly, exacting a staggering toll on the invaders, only to mount ferocious counterattacks when the Imperium advanced too far. To the aliens' shock, many of their vaunted technological advantages began to falter in the face of human tenacity. Maintenance depots and repair facilities, juicy targets for resistance bombers, struggled to keep pace with the damage. And the Imperium's highly networked systems, so adept at countering the digital weapons of peer civilizations, proved bafflingly fragile against an enemy whose weapons were mechanical, even crude. On the bridge of the subjugator, Commander Zora Vox paced restlessly before the flickering tactical displays, her normally impassive features tight with strain. The human resistance was like nothing in the Imperium's long history of conquest. Decentralized, improvised, maddeningly resilient. Their primitive weapons and jury-rigged hardware should have been laughably obsolete, yet they continued to sting. "Assume a high orbit," Zara snapped to her helmsman. "Prepare the fleet for a general bombardment. We will scour these vermin from the face of their world." Even as the Imperium ships began to climb, blood-red targeting lasers stabbing downward, a swarm of ancient human fighters rose to meet them. S-16s, tornadoes, even a handful of restored F-4 Phantoms, all packed to the gills with anti-ship missiles and flown by pilots with murder in their eyes. "Tally-ho!" bandits at 12 o'clock high crackled across the comm as the flights arced upwards, juking and weaving through clouds of anti-aircraft fire. "Let's show these alien pukes what a turkey shoot really looks like." With whoops of defiance and the crackle of analog missiles igniting, the swarm of antiquated jets carved into the Imperium formation like avenging eagles, exploiting the momentary weakness in the alien shields. Fireballs blossomed against the night sky as the first alien ships began to tumble and burn. On the subjugator's bridge, alarms screamed as hull breaches vented atmosphere into the void. Zara clung to her command console, eyes wide with disbelief as her grand bombardment dissolved into chaos. The humans, the infuriating, unkillable humans. Their relentless defiance defied all the cold equations of logic. As the last fighter slid beneath the alien shields to hammer the subjugator with a volley of ancient sidewinders, Zara felt a dark foreboding settle over her heart. She had gravely underestimated this enemy, allowed arrogance and complacency to blind her to their true threat. But no longer. Cold fury crystallized in her chest. This upstart race would pay for their insolence, she vowed. The Imperium would teach them the price of defiance. But the Imperium commander was no fool, however shaken her confidence. She could see the mounting losses, the incredible toll the human resistance had exacted. The Imperium still held the technological advantage, but the ferocity and sheer bloody-minded resilience of the human spirit had proven to be an equalizer. The equation of conquest had changed, the sure victory now thrown into doubt. As the battered subjugator limped into higher orbit, and the ragged human defenders paused to rearm, both sides steeled themselves for the next round, neither willing to yield. The war for Earth had become a crucible, a test of will and endurance between two implacable foes. And though the odds still favored the alien invaders, a sliver of unease had crept into the Imperium's cold calculations. The humans, for all their primitive weaponry and crude tactics, refused to be conquered. They would fight to the last breath, the last bullet, heedless of the cost. In that grim, unyielding defiance, the Imperium faced an unsettling truth. For perhaps the first time in its long history of conquest, it had met an equal in tenacity and resolve. The war was far from over, but neither side would escape unscathed. Snatching victory. In the months following the initial Imperium invasion, the war for Earth had ground into a bloody stalemate. The aliens' technological superiority remained formidable, but the human resistance refused to be crushed, fighting on with a ferocity that staggered the Imperium leadership. In hidden bases and shattered cities across the globe, the ragged defenders licked their wounds and tallied their losses. Nearly half the pre-war human population was dead or enslaved, and the great nations of old lay in ruins. Yet the survivors, bound together by grim resolve, prepared to mount one final desperate assault against the alien foe. We've identified a weakness in their command and control network, Dr. Briggs explained to the haggard rebel leaders gathered in a concrete bunker. A vulnerability in the quantum encryption they used to coordinate their fleets. Admiral Singh, his once crisp uniform, tattered and stained, leaned forward intently. You found a way to crack their codes. Briggs shook her head. Not crack, exactly. More like bypass. She tapped a few keys, bringing up a schematic on the bunker's main screen. It's an old hacker trick from the pre-Imperium days. A replay attack, it was called. If we can intercept one of their encrypted transmissions and beam it back at just the right frequency, we can fool their authentication protocols. Hijack their own comms, mused Ivanova, the former ISS commander. And if we time it right, we can send a false signal. Briggs finished. One that will draw their fleet out of position. Divide their forces at the critical moment, when we launch our main assault. President Tanner, her once neat suit long since replaced by battle fatigues, nodded slowly. It's a gamble. There won't be any second chances. A hulking figure at the back of the room stirred, the overhead lights glinting off his metal faceplate. It was General Xu Lin, grievously wounded in the early days of the invasion, and now sustained by a crude exoskeleton. When the enemy expects deception, speak the truth, he rumbled, his voice a synthesized rasp. We will sell this ruse with real blood. Under the general's cyborg gaze, a plan began to take shape, a feint, a sacrificial assault to draw the alien fleet out of orbit, while the main thrust of the human forces massed in secret. There would be no clever trickery, no subtle subterfuge. This would be a contest of sheer will and bloody attrition, a long-odds gambit with the fate of humanity riding on the outcome. Over the next weeks, a stream of battered vessels began to slip away from Earth, one or two at a time to avoid alien notice. Mothballed freighters, rust-streaked tankers, private yachts, anything that could still limp into space under its own power. Each one carried a precious cargo of volunteers, soldiers, and citizens alike, grimly determined to do their part. As the ragtag fleet assembled at the rallying point, a lone ship made a daring run toward the looming Imperium blockade, engines straining at the edge of tolerance. "This is Beagle 5, transmitting in the blind," the pilot broadcast, his voice taut with barely leashed fear. "We have critical intelligence on human fleet movements. Authentication code Sigma Epsilon Niner, priority Alpha." Even as the Imperium ships moved to intercept, harsh alien voices crackling across the comm channels, Dr. Briggs and her team swung into action, hijacking the transmission and beaming it back on a precisely modulated frequency. For a few heartbeats, the entire war seemed to pause, the seconds stretching as the fate of the Rus hung in the balance. Then, with a flurry of guttural commands, the Imperium fleet began to break orbit, ponderous black shapes realigning to face the supposed threat. In their arrogance, drunk on the hubris of certain victory, the alien commanders had fallen for the desperate bluff. "They're taking the bait," Admiral Singh reported, his voice tight with sudden hope. "Human fleet, all wings. Execute." Like avenging furies, the ragged human ships swept out from their concealed staging grounds, improvised weapons bristling from every airlock and cargo bay. Mining freighters disgorged swarms of makeshift attack drones, each one little more than a guidance package strapped to an oversized warhead. Hacking groups swarmed Imperium systems with salvaged pre-invasion malware, sowing confusion and chaos, and every ship still capable of mounting a gun charged into the teeth of the alien point defenses, trading lives for seconds of vulnerability. At the tip of the spear flew the ISS Gagarin, the ancient space station's weapon mounts glowing white-hot as they spat railgun rounds and salvaged EMP warheads into the enemy fleet. On the station's cramped bridge, Commander Ivanova gripped the fire control console with white-knuckled intensity, her face a mask of focus. "Weapons status," she snapped, the deck shuddering as another alien plasma blast hammered the station's depleted shields. "EMP banks are dry," Specialist Liu reported grimly. "Railguns 2 and 4 have lost containment. One good hit, and we're done." Ivanova exhaled sharply, a brief flicker of fear quickly subsumed by resolve. They were all dead anyway. What mattered was making it count. "Ramming speed," she ordered. "Hold course. Not one step back." Yet even as the Gagarin hurtled toward the heart of the alien fleet, the Imperium commanders were beginning to realize their error. The human fleet had left their flanks exposed, drawn their reserves out of position. With a snarl of furious commands, Commander Zora Vox ordered her ships to regroup, desperate to crush the impudent Earthlings before the trap could close. She was too late. With a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very stars, the main body of the human fleet burst from the far side of the moon. Makeshift fusion torches blazing as they bore down on the Imperium's unprotected rear. Jury-rigged mass drivers hurled salvaged asteroid rock. The projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds by atomic explosions and gravity boosts. Swarms of single-use kinetic kill vehicles streaked ahead of the charge, homing in on the wavering alien shields with merciless precision. And at the very tip of the formation, leading the charge like a knight of old, flew a battered, venerable shape instantly recognizable to any student of human history. The Space Shuttle Enterprise herself, ancient ceramic hull pocked with scars and patches older than any of her current crew. "All hands, brace for contact." Admiral Singh roared from the commander's seat, knuckles white on the helm controls. "Let's show these alien bastards what it means to fight humans on our own turf." With a bone-shaking roar, the Enterprise plowed into the heart of the reeling Imperium formation, jury-rigged plasma lances and kinetic harpoons ripping into the unprotected bellies of the alien ships. Close behind came the ISS Mir, pitted hull bristling with angular weapon mounts, and the ancient Hubble Space Telescope, the grandest instrument of human vision, now a makeshift dreadnought hurling 5-ton tungsten spears. Caught utterly off guard, their fleet in disarray and their command paralyzed by the loss of Zora's flagship, The Imperium forces reeled beneath the onslaught. Shields failed, hulls buckled and shattered, atmosphere and alien crew venting into the void. Against all odds, against all reason, the ragged humans had snatched victory from the jaws of certain defeat. On the shattered bridge of the dying subjugator, Zara Vox hauled herself upright with the last of her strength, a snarl of pure hate on her soot-streaked features. Even now, with utter defeat looming, she would claim one last bit of vengeance. Scuttle the fleet, she coughed into the buckled command console, dark blood flecking her lips. Send everything we have into the planet's surface. Deny them their prize. Yet even as her clawed finger stabbed down on the fail-safe key, a strong human hand closed around her wrist like a vice. Zara's head snapped up to see a battered human in a scorched vacuum suit, his visor starred with cracks, a jaw clenched with implacable resolve. "I don't know if you can understand me," the man said, his voice a rasp of pain and exhaustion. "But it's over. Your fleet is scrap. Your army is broken. And this is our world. You don't get to take it with you." Zara snarled, a sound of pure hate, and lunged for the human's throat with the last of her strength. But more humans were pouring onto the shattered bridge now, subduing the surviving crew with merciless efficiency. Too late, the Imperium commander understood the final fatal mistake that had doomed her conquest. The human spirit could not be quantified or predicted, could not be broken by all the cold equations of war. In their darkest hour, with all hope lost, the ragged earthlings had reached deep within themselves and found a defiance as unquenchable as the stars themselves. And in the face of that fierce, unrelenting will to endure, all the technological might of the Imperium had proven as dust in the solar wind. As the last few Imperium ships limped into hyperspace, trailing smoke and debris, a ragged cheer rose from 1,000 human throats. The exultant voices of soldiers and civilians, spacers and hackers, united in jubilant exhaustion. Earth, bloody but unbroken, had prevailed against the alien tide. There was little time for celebration. The rebuilding would take generations, and the scars of the invasion would linger far beyond living memory. But the legacy of humanity's desperate stand would endure, a shining beacon of courage and resilience against impossible odds. In the years to come, the story would be told and retold, passed down from parent to child as a reminder of the indomitable human spirit. How a ragtag band of survivors, armed with little more than grit and makeshift weapons, had stood fast against the most technologically advanced foe the galaxy had ever seen, and triumphed. And on the blasted, slowly healing Earth, monuments would rise to mark the sites of the most desperate battles, solemn cenotaphs inscribed with the names of the fallen. Yet no monument would speak louder than the enduring human will itself, the stubborn refusal to submit or despair, even in the darkest of hours. At the dedication of the Victory Memorial in New York, an ancient veteran gazed up at the towering titanium statues with eyes that had seen too much. Beside him, a young boy fidgeted, clearly eager to be off playing with his friends. "Grandpa," the boy asked, tugging at the old man's sleeve, "were you really there when we beat the aliens?" The veteran smiled, a wistful expression tinged with old pain. "Yeah, kid, I was there. Me and a whole lot of other ordinary folks, just doing what needed to be done." He looked back up at the monument, where the figures of soldiers, medics, engineers, and spacers stood united in eternal defiance. It wasn't about glory or revenge. It was about standing up for what matters, for the right of our species to choose its own destiny among the stars, free from the yoke of any conqueror. The old man's voice grew distant, seeing once again the desperate battles and acts of staggering courage. "We didn't beat them because we were stronger or smarter or better armed. We beat them because we never gave up, because we drew a line in the sand of our own world and swore not one step back." He reached out and ruffled the boy's hair. "Maybe you'll understand someday, when you have little ones of your own. The price of freedom is high. It always is. But as long as the human spirit endures, It will be a price worth paying. And with one last salute to the valiant dead, the old veteran turned and slowly walked away, the young boy's hand held firmly in his own. Behind them, the monuments gleamed beneath the light of a free earth, testament to a legacy that would never be forgotten. The war was over, the invaders vanquished. But the mission of safeguarding humanity's stubborn, defiant, unbreakable will, would go on now and for generations to come. It was a burden each human would carry in their heart, a solemn duty purchased at the cost of so many sacrifices. The Imperium had learned the lesson too late. Never underestimate the tenacity of an earthling backed into a corner. For when all seemed lost, when the cold equations of war all pointed to inevitable defeat, that was when the human spirit blazed brightest. And as long as that spirit endured, no enemy could ever truly conquer humanity. Bloodied, battered, bereaved, but never broken, never bowed, and never, ever surrendering the destiny they had worked so hard to seize among the stars. The battle for Earth had ended, but the greater struggle, the eternal struggle to defend the right of each species to chart its own path, free of the shackles of would-be conquerors, would go on. A new chapter for humanity opened, one earned through the tenacity and sacrifice of all those who had fought and died beneath alien skies. The galaxy beckoned, a horizon replete with challenges and opportunities in equal measure. But whatever trials lay ahead, the children of Earth would remain ever a people of indomitable resolve, their spirits steeled by the hardships overcome. The legacy of the Imperium's failed conquest would become a rallying cry for all those who cherished liberty over tyranny, a shining example of what could be achieved through unity and unrelenting determination in the face of desperate odds. As the peoples of Earth stepped forward into this new era, the echoes of their sacrifice would travel with them, an eternal reminder of the price of freedom and the magnificent heights to which the unfettered human spirit could soar.